He was a feared mafia boss with a past soaked in blood, until one night, a single, unexpected encounter shattered his world forever. You think you know how a criminal's story ends, but you have never heard a tale of redemption this powerful. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story, it is a lesson that will change how you see everyone you pass on the street. Before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. The neon lights of the city blurred into streaks of jagged red and cold blue. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel of my armored car. The scent of stale gunpowder still clung to my leather jacket like a persistent ghost. Every shadow in the alleyway looked like a threat waiting to strike. I walked toward the safe house while the rain began to lash against the pavement. Suddenly, a sharp metallic click echoed through the heavy silence of the night. I froze in my tracks as the cold barrel of a gun pressed firmly against my temple. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird desperate for freedom. I closed my eyes and braced myself for the darkness I had courted for so many years. Then a soft and trembling voice cut through the tension of the air. The stranger whispered that it was time to let the weapons fall to the ground. I turned slowly to see an elderly woman standing there with eyes full of sorrow. She did not look at me with fear but with a profound and steady understanding. She reached out a wrinkled hand and gently touched my clenched fist. The metal of my weapon felt heavy and alien against the warmth of her palm. She spoke of the many lives lost and the heavy burden of my regretful past. Her words were not an accusation but a mirror reflecting the ruin of my soul. I felt the immense weight of my choices crumbling away with every slow breath. The world felt fragile and quiet as the tears finally welled in my tired eyes. She led me into her small kitchen where the air smelled of fresh tea and bread. She bound my shaking hands and wiped away the grit of my violent life. I realized in that moment that kindness was the only true power left in the world. The ice around my heart began to melt under the gaze of her sincere compassion. I began to work with my hands to mend the things I had once destroyed. I helped her repair the broken fence and tended to the garden in the morning light. Every act of service became a thread that stitched my shattered spirit back together. The pain of my past did not disappear, but it no longer defined my future. I learned that even the bloodiest hands can be washed clean by the grace of others. Love is the quiet force that connects the most broken pieces of a human life. We are never truly beyond the reach of mercy if we are willing to change. The threads that bind us are woven from the forgiveness we give to ourselves. I found my peace in the simple act of being a brother to my fellow man. I watched the steam rise from the porcelain cup in the morning sun. My reflection in the window showed a man I was only just beginning to know. The lines on my face were maps of battles I no longer needed to fight. I stepped outside to see the neighbor struggling with a heavy crate of supplies. I did not hesitate to cross the yard and take the burden from her tired arms. Her smile was a sunrise that warmed the corners of my long-hardened heart. We worked side by side as the afternoon shadows stretched long across the grass. There was a strange and beautiful rhythm to this honest and simple existence. The fear that used to dictate my every movement had finally faded away. I caught myself humming a tune I had not heard since I was a young boy. The woman stopped her work and watched me with a gaze of quiet wonder. She told me that the greatest strength is found in the stillness of a soul. I understood then that my previous life was merely a frantic search for safety. I had been blind to the fact that home is a feeling built by shared kindness. I looked at my hands and saw the callus forming from years of labor. These were not scars of violence but symbols of a life rebuilt with intention. A gentle knock came at the door as the evening stars began to emerge. I moved toward the entrance with a sense of calm I had never known before. A young man stood there shivering with a look of desperation in his eyes. I recognized that haunted expression because it had belonged to me once. I invited him inside and offered him a place at the wooden kitchen table. The warmth of the room seemed to embrace him as he collapsed into a chair. I placed a bowl of warm soup before him and sat down to listen closely. He spoke of a life on the run and the heavy guilt that consumed his thoughts. I saw the woman watching us from the corner with a knowing and gentle grace. I placed my hand on his shoulder and told him that he was finally safe. The cycle of pain would end right here within these walls of humble healing. We spent the night sharing stories of our past to clear the path forward. The room felt lighter as if the very air was clearing of ancient suffocating dust. I knew my journey of redemption had only just begun in this quiet sanctuary. There were so many others in the shadows who needed a hand to guide them. I felt a surge of purpose that was far stronger than any command I ever gave. The mission of my life had shifted from taking to giving with total sincerity. We walked out to the porch to watch the moon bathe the world in silver light. I breathed in the cool night air and felt a profound sense of true belonging. The morning sun climbed over the horizon to touch the edges of our garden. I stood among the flowers and watched the young man find his own rhythm. He was learning to plant the seeds that would eventually feed the hungry. Every movement he made was a lesson in patience and the value of growth. We were not just mending the earth but also restoring our own shattered identities. I realized that we were becoming a bridge for those who were completely lost. The woman brought us water and sat on the bench to watch our progress. She told us that the most beautiful gardens are grown from the hardest soil. I thought about the men I once commanded and the lives I had once broken. I vowed to reach out to them not with threats but with an offer of peace. It was a daunting task that required a courage far greater than any combat. I picked up my tools and felt the steady beat of a heart that was finally alive. The town began to notice the change in the atmosphere of our small street. People who once avoided my gaze now offered a nod of quiet acknowledgement. There was a sincerity in their eyes that I had not dared to hope for before. I spent my afternoons writing letters to those who were still trapped in shadows. I described the light of this place and the freedom found in honest labor. I did not ask for forgiveness because I knew I had to earn it every single day. The postman came by with a bundle of letters that carried weight and expectation. I opened the first envelope to find a message from a man I had once betrayed. He wrote that he was tired of running and wanted to find a different way. My hands were steady as I read the words that signaled the possibility of hope. I looked toward the house where the woman and the young man were sharing bread. They were the anchors that held me fast as I navigated this new and vast world. I felt a responsibility to guide these souls who were drifting in the dark. We stood together on the porch as the clouds began to gather for a summer rain. The sound of the water against the roof was a lullaby for our weary minds. I prepared the extra rooms with fresh sheets and bowls of simple nourishment. We were preparing for a new arrival who needed the same mercy I had received. I put my hand on his shoulder and told him that he was welcome to stay. He joined the group of men working on the roof and found a rhythm of grace. His movements were clumsy at first, but he soon found the peace of labor. The rest of the community accepted him without asking for his history. They saw a man who was willing to work and who was ready to be honest. I watched the sun dip below the rooftops as we prepared for the evening. My life was becoming a mosaic of souls finding their way back to humanity. I felt a sense of clarity that made every past trauma seem like a distant dream. I knew that our work was only scratching the surface of what was needed. There were thousands of others trapped in the cold dark of the city grid. I began to draft a map of the sectors that still required our attention. We were becoming a beacon for those who were tired of the violent life. I looked toward the street and saw more people arriving with hopeful eyes. The city had finally transformed from a landscape of fear into a tapestry of light. I stood on the roof of the community center and looked across the horizon. The once dark corners were now illuminated by the efforts of 1,000 hands. I felt the presence of the woman who had first offered me that cup of tea. She stood beside me as the stars began to flicker into the velvet night sky. We had built something that lived far beyond the reach of my original choices. The men who had followed me into battle were now leading others to peace. They were teachers and builders and guardians of the harmony we fostered. I realized that my past was no longer a shadow but a foundation for growth. It provided the perspective needed to guide those who were truly lost. The moral of our journey is that redemption is never a destination but a practice. We must choose to perform the work of love and service every single day. No soul is so damaged that it cannot be mended by the threads of compassion. The power to change the world begins with the decision to change oneself. I felt a profound sense of completeness as I watched the community flourish. I had learned that the most dangerous weapon is the one we hold against ourselves. And the most powerful tool is the hand we reach out to help another rise. We are all bound together by the invisible threads of our shared humanity. I finally understood that my life was not about the things I could control. It was about the love I could sow in the soil of a broken world. I stepped down from the roof and walked into the warmth of the crowded hall. The sound of laughter and music was a testament to the life we had saved. I realized that the story of my life was not the one I wrote in blood. It was the one I continued to write in the quiet service of my fellow man. I was finally at peace because I had become a servant to the common good. The threads that bind us are stronger than any force of darkness or greed. I took my seat at the table and smiled as I looked into the eyes of friends. My journey had come to a beautiful end in the service of a new beginning. Thank you for such a meaningful journey. It has been an honor to share this story of redemption and hope with you. As requested, here is the translation of the message you provided. You are never alone.